off season. We ain't got one of those on 5 to go. Hey, at episode 338, yeah, we're going to be all negative and hold pitchforks and talk about how terrible everything is and how upset we are. Or we can enjoy some high drama and look at it critically. And there were some bones to pick, but we're going to congratulate some winners, talk about what could have been, and yeah, even talk about what we didn't see after the race, too. We'll also look ahead to the offseason, and it's only going to be 3 short months, and we're already back at Daytona. And we'll talk about a champion who we know is going to be racing in San Diego. That's all again here on the 5 to Go podcast. And we welcome you in. We're just 3 regular guys trying to talk about racing. That's our golf game. Welcome to the 5 to Go podcast. It's here on YouTube, GoPRN.com, Spotify, and Apple. I'm your co-host, Doug Fireball Turnbull, from the traffic team at 11 Alive with Rachel Cox Rosen, and also in the AJC, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, columnist there. And I love getting to do this, though. This is a way to kind of cleanse the palate for the week here. And we have a lot to digest after championship weekend in Phoenix. We're so thankful you all are tuning in, and we'd love for you, if you like what you hear here, to share and subscribe and all those things, because why not? You got to share the good things. That's what we try to do, too. Joining us on the line today, he always dresses for the job he wants. Hire Devin. Respond right here. He's our super racing fanalist, our roving racing journo. He's going to help us process some of this, bringing that Gen Z perspective. Devin Kupka, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing well, coming off a thrilling championship weekend. The times have changed, so now the sun is setting a lot earlier, but sun is setting is coming up a little bit earlier as well. So we got a lot of earlier and then great weekend, but I'm doing well.
Yeah, we got the old day. What is it? Standard time jet lag.
Enjoyed my 5th year in a row working 5th graders day out. Scrimmage game for UNG men's basketball yesterday. Came back with North Georgia kind of in a temporary consultant role, helping them out get their basketball broadcast up and running. So
look at you.
It was fun. It was fun yesterday.
Yeah, Dev, I'm telling you, hire the guy. Respond right here, everybody. Reach out to Devin Kupka, okay, because he's got all that talent there. This is just part of his golf game, too. Also joining us on the line, he's a championship-winning mechanic, 2018 Georgia Racing Hall of Fame nominee, and grinding those gears, helping him turn the right RPM. Dawsonville, Dan O'Elliott. How you doing, brother?
Doing good. Love to hear Devin keep up with my alma mater there, so keep it up there, Devin. Doing a great job.
Right here.
Yep.
That's it.
Got it right
UNG.
Here. So, yep, all good.
Dan Elliott, the OG from UNG, and Devin, the new school there, recent graduate there. In fact, Dev, you've got I know you graduate in the summer, but you have a ceremony coming up, right?
I do, next month.
That's it. I need to figure out how I could get there. It doesn't jive well with the work schedule. Just like 10 o'clock on a weekday or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, is that going to be streamed?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, streaming. Done.
And guess what? You know what they used for graduation now to speak the names? AI.
AI.
That's
AI.
Come on. How hard is it to say names?
An AI is going to be a good off-season episode for us for 5 to Go podcast.
For sure. And I want to tell you, there's no doubt, for as much as let's just rip the Band-Aid off, for as much as crew chiefs and engineers and team leadership, whatever, get criticized for decision making, a lot of it gets run through. It doesn't mean that AI spits out and says do this, but AI at least spits out A, B, C, D, and here's the information of why you should or shouldn't do each option. And I'm sure that had to do with the thinking of the number 11 team and the number 19 team, by the way, on that final pit stop that ended up being the deciding factor in not just the Phoenix Race Championship weekend, but in the Cup Championship. Congratulations to our race winners, first off, from the weekend, Corey Heim and Jesse Love, who also became champions, and Ryan Blaney, who, much like when the spoiler was Ross Chastain on Blaney's 2023 championship, played spoiler in the championship that went to, as everyone predicted all day Sunday. Oh, no, they didn't. Kyle Larson. Not a surprise champion maybe entering the race, but certainly a Sunday played out where Larson led 0 laps and Denny Hamlin started on the pole and led 208 circuits, that Hamlin was finally going to get that beloved Cup Series trophy. And as you well know, if you are if you are liking NASCAR enough to actually listen to this podcast, you know that, of course, Kyle Larson ended up the champ by finishing third in the race, set it by an overtime finish. William Byron's cut tire, who's also championship 4 contender, the guy that really most of the day looked like he was going to be the one to put it to Hamlin, had a long run car, even won the first stage. Ended up Byron's the one that had it indirectly taken away from Denny Hamlin, and that's where it all played out. Blaney wins in a photo finish over Brad Keselowski, who almost broke a 1.5+ long winless streak, but he just couldn't hold the car on his old tires. He didn't pit at all last set of turns. Blaney had taken 2 tires, as did third-place finisher Kyle Larson. Joey Logano, old Lucky Logan, he was the meat in the sandwich right in front of Denny Hamlin when Hamlin couldn't make the low line work on that final overtime restart. Logano finished 4th. Kyle Busch finished 5th. His 3rd top 5 only of the 2025 season, his lowest total ever in the Cup Series. Worst season of his career, I think a lot of people could point to there. Denny Hamlin ended up finishing 6th after dominating the day. Josh Berry was 7th. Michael McDowell, who was a lap down at one point, finished 8th. Ryan Preece, who was out on those old tires, faded to 9th. And Chase Elliott, who led at one point after a pit sequence. He had to make a second pit stop, though, on a strain, but no one covered it because he's not the championship 4. He pitted from the lead under yellow a second time. I don't know if there's a penalty or what. It was never said. And he finished in the 10th spot there, defending not race winner, but the previous winner at Phoenix, Christopher Bell, who many thought if he makes it to the championship 4, watches him being the main challenger to the Penske cars. He only finished 11th in this race. The other championship contenders I did not mention there, Chase Briscoe ended up 18th, had a tire go down middle of the race, restarted on the front row late in the race with Larson taking 2 tires, but he took 4 tires at the end like Hamlin did. And then William Byron, I think, ended up finishing. I got to scroll down. I just lost it. Where was he on the page? Was he 32nd, 33rd? Byron 33rd, and yet a 3rd championship 4 appearance in a row, guys, for William Byron, and he is not able to take home the crown. So let's get into it here. Dare I ask you, Devin, top takeaway?
I think what a great race we got to see on Sunday in the NASCAR Cup Series Championship. I thought this was perhaps even better than the Quaker State 400 earlier in the year that was won by Hendrick teammate Chase Elliott back in June. It was a great race from top to bottom. It was really fun seeing Chase Briscoe being able to make his way through the field, see the battle between Byron and Hamlin, also Blaney and Hamlin a little bit too, because Blaney had a really strong car on Sunday. I thought that was a terrific race, and I could arguably say that this is the best championship race that I've got to witness live, like watching, by far, and the best one so far this decade as well. I just thought it was a great championship race, great championship battle. Had a lot of the best of the best in the Cup Series battling it out for it on this past Sunday. So I really thought it was a great race.
I do agree. I certainly out of the Phoenix championship races, which were the only ones this decade, Chase Elliott's Phoenix championship Cup win in 2020 was the first one after transitioning from Homestead there to the desert, and it's going to go back to Homestead next year. Certainly that's 6 races, and saying it's the best out of those 6, and certainly it was better than some of the Homestead races that got really stretched out too. Now, we're not there are people listening that were probably mad about everything they saw, or many things they saw. There are things that we didn't love either, and we're going to get into that. So just don't think we get paid by NASCAR under the table here to do NASCAR public relations. But there's no doubt that the tire, here's my take besides the championship drama, the tire that Goodyear brought threw a big wrench in the plans. It literally decided the Cup champion by William Byron's caution. All right? It made for teams to have to decide between speed and I don't mean safety for the drivers, but safety as far as tires not going down. And it rewarded drivers that knew how to take care of their cars and not over-abuse them. William Byron even said after the race, why did it take all weekend for him to have a tire go down? he finally was pushing it harder at the end, knowing this is it for the championship. And he said that might have been the cause. He really didn't know. There was also heating issues just with the rubber coming off the cars. I think Kyle Larson's tire was actually caused when it went down. So all four championship drivers had tires go down at some point. Even Hamlin under yellow had a soft left rear tire. Larson's was caused by the rubber buildup on the air ducts. Heat buildup melted a bead there, which then the heavy metal cut the tire, or hot metal. I'm sorry. So there's all sorts of different variables here. Instead of mash the gas and the tires hold up. So there's my take. Dan, I know you kind of had a little bit of fire in your belly really the last few weeks about how the season was playing out. What did you walk away with from Sunday as we ended the season?
It was, I think, and we'll talk about more of the weekend for the other series, but I think it came down to me to how many heartbreaks can you have in one weekend, and especially in one race. And the deciding factor within the last 10 laps of the race was really your whole. It was like watching a good Hollywood movie, in the fact of the plot twist at the end was not predictable. And
Yeah.
and you saw many things happen that you didn't think would happen, but I think that key to this was, I don't think that, no fault of Goodyear. I don't think that they brought a bad tire. I think the tire was good, but you have to factor in the deal that how aggressive you had to set the car up to do what you were going to do for a championship. I
Yeah.
think there was the fine line gamble for a lot of people, but no one, I've not heard anyone say much about this, was how hard they had to run and how much brake they had to use, because as you said, when those brake ducts got clogged or anything, even the fact that they did use more brakes, and just like the shifting, I heard some of the drivers shift twice instead of
Mm-hmm.
once, and it was an aggressive day. End of subject. It was an aggressive day, and you had to do what you did to be in victory lane. But you clearly, as was said years ago, you had to have the horseshoes in your back pocket to be there at the end of the day.
It all takes a little bit of luck. And if this was a 3 or 4 race championship round or a 10 race playoff, you could have said, hey, Hamlin lost this one, but he had 3 other opportunities this round, or 9 other opportunities in the playoffs. And in the end, that one call changed it all. And that is why this format will change. It just seems every indication is it's going to change. And to what it changes to, I just be careful, everybody, what you wish for, because the same amount of flaws, I'm not saying the exact same flaws, but the same amount of them, people are going to find in a 36 race format, 10 race format, 3-3-4, whatever else they decide. They might get rid of win and you're in. Okay, that's great, but what do you replace it with to reward winners? I mean, there's all sorts of stuff, and that's why this decision isn't going to be easy. That's why we're not going to hear about this. I don't anticipate, and I could be totally wrong, I don't have inside knowledge, for weeks. I think we're going to get through deep into the offseason, have some testing. They're going to be testing some short track stuff, and I think around the rules bulletin time, where they announce other parts of the rules facets,
I think for as long as I thought the season was going to be, when you look back at the very first of the season and you're trying to predict a winner before the series ever starts. And the worst thing about this is that it's over and there are no other chances for anybody else. It's over. And now it's time to start again. And you're back doing the same thing again. But I think for me, and the fact that you can, as we've alluded to on several occasions, is the fact that it comes down to within 3 organizations who were the champions probably going to come from, and I'm just trying to root for someone that's outside of that, because give me a break. I want to see some new faces. I want to see some new names. I want to see some new owner organizations.
Yeah. Well, let's get into there's a lot to
Yep.
unpack right here. I think in this race too, some last real quick because what you said right there it actually ties into a thread on X that Brad Keselowski, the runner-up finisher Sunday, had, where he kind of got asked about the big three idea and how do you break that up, and he said it's OEM or manufacturer related. So let's get into that first, or get into that in a moment. Some other things coming to an end from the Cup Series besides this season. Now, there was not a lot of silly season action. All right. Really one of the main driver moves, Daniel Suarez spent 5 good years at Trackhouse. He was their original driver, and he will be moving next year to Spire. So his tenure, half a decade and 5 years, especially for mid-level teams, is a decent amount of time. That tenure is coming to an end. Justin Haley's 1+ years, 1.25 years or so at Spire Motorsports as a result coming to an end. Randall Burnett had been the crew chief up until these last few races, the crew chief of the number 8 car from when Tyler Reddick joined the Cup Series. And so that was 2020, so almost 6 full years. He's moved on from that. All right, so, because he's going to go and be over with Connor Zilic over at Trackhouse. You also have, this is the last race of the Chevrolet body. They're going to have a new body on their car, so I guess all the bodies technically changed for the Gen 7 race car. I don't even know what they're going to call this body, by the way, the new one, because they're racing a fake Camaro this year because there is not a Chevy Camaro on the roads. That's a new model anyway. But you had that coming to an end. And then in the lower series, of course, there's a lot of driver turnover, but maybe the biggest ones were Colleague Racing ended his Xfinity program, at least for now. Maybe if they bring the Ram or Dodge program to Cup, that it trickles down again. But they won't be in Xfinity at all next year. And also, Matt Crafton, 23 years. Truck Series. That's huge. And actually, I think he was longer. It said 20. I read 23, but I think it's longer than that. But nonetheless, Matt Crafton had his last race at ThorSport, won't be a full-time driver. At least it's not expected he will be next season. So a lot of things sunsetted there. And I put on X a few more of those, at Doug Turnbull, if you want to find that. But it's easy to get so hyper-focused on this championship. And there's other things that matter. There were almost 40 teams that showed up to race for something. And it kind of gets lost, some of those benchmarks, if you will. Now, Dan, to your point about the OEMs and the big three and all that, even though there were a good number of winners this season, it really didn't seem like anybody on that next tier down, whether it's Trackhouse or Richard Childress Racing, Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing, although they all collectively as a group, RFK ran pretty well. 2 of them didn't make the playoffs. Actually, none of them made the playoffs. It really, and with no Stewart Haas Racing as a big time Ford team anymore, it seemed like, even 2311 lost some ground. It seemed like, although Bubba Wallace ran much better than he ever has consistently, 2311 lost some speed, especially late in the year to the other Toyotas at Gibbs. Legacy wasn't there with the Toyotas nearly as close. It seemed like it really was, to your point, Dan. It's my long, long way of saying the top 3 manufacturer teams got all the gold. And then there were no Fords in the championship for anyway, so whatever. But
Yeah, but that's
Dan,
not really.
Yeah. So, my question is as to you being a team that was independent. And granted, you were very much tied in with Ford, but you were not. There was not a bigger Ford team you were tied to. I'm trying to think of a big giant Ford team at the time. It's not like you came in with the Wood brothers, or they weren't in their big days
Bud
then.
Moore.
Bud Moore. Yeah, sure. You weren't their satellite team. You were Melling Racing or the Elliott team before that. This has to, when you look at how far it's come and how centralized things have gone, that can't make you feel great.
No, it can't. And that's the thing about it is for anybody that comes in and or wants to come in and be a part of the sport, it just, each year that you do this seems like it gets a little bit bigger. And then when you look at where the sponsorship money has come from the time that we came in, when we first came in, you really needed about $1 million a year sponsor to run a season, and I don't know that I could even fathom what these 3 upper echelon teams manufacturer teams are even. I dare to guess what that sponsorship level would be,
Yeah.
because it would be astronomical.
Well, maybe before we get to sponsor, what the cost to run the 24 car full time is. Take all the decals off. Just say to do the exact same thing they were doing with no sponsors, what would it cost out of pocket? And I bet it's hard to quantify because how much is coming from Chevrolet just as a provider
Yeah.
and how much is coming from this and that. And then if you want to go sponsors, well, you got Exalta on the car. Well, Rick Hendrick's a $1 billion car owner, a car dealership owner. Well, there's got to be a tie-in there. HendrickCars.com. Okay, like how much money is there actually being traded or switching hands? Shell and Joey Logano, Penske, same way.
But on the outside looking in, this is just where racing has gotten to today. It's no one's fault. It just evolved, and as you throw more money at it, and just like we talked about before with the Garage 56 and going to Le Mans, and there was no limit to the budget. It was an unlimited budget.
Yeah.
So when you get to numbers like that, Doug, Devin, you can't even go there, because we can't conceive a no budget, because when we're out of money, we're out of money. But it's almost like you're racing for another country. Whatever money you need, this is what we're going to throw at it. We just want to make sure that at the end of the day, you either bring home wins or a championship or all of the above, and you've got something to show for it at the end of the day.
Yeah, no doubt. I do think I took Kozlowski's point. You really have to be centered with the OEM. It would be nice if there were enough key partner or enough manufacturers to eliminate this idea of key partners.
Doug, what if you were a driver trying to come in, and these are the three organizations, let's say, that all the drivers want to get to, and that's ultimately one goal you have as a driver, is to get to one of these organizations, because I'm probably not even going to have a snowball's chance in purgatory of getting anywhere unless I find myself in one of these seats at the beginning of the year. There's the sad part.
Well, yeah, and with the charter limiting, I mean, each of those teams has four. No, Penske has three. So the charter agreement limits teams that didn't already have four teams to having only three. So you think about it in the Cup Series, that's 11 seats. All right, Hendrick grandfathered with four, Gibbs grandfathered with four, three at Penske. And you could say Josh Berry and the Wood brothers is a fourth there because they are treated as the same. So let's just say 12. There's 12 of those seats. All the oldest person in those four organizations right now is Denny Hamlin, who's 2 years away from retiring. So one of those is going to open in 2 years. You could say Alex Bowman's on a hot seat. He's in his mid-30s. Kyle Larson's in his early 30s. Josh Berry's in his mid-30s. Like, there isn't an obvious place besides Hamlin retiring where a seat would even open up, very obviously, unless somebody started really underperforming, which could be Bowman one of these days. But that if you're Corey Heim, who has no full-time ride next year, to your point, Dan, our Truck Series champion, who set record after record in the Truck Series this year, arguably the most dominant season in the modern NASCAR era in all three series, when you add up, and again, he's got a weaker field to run against, and he doesn't have a full-time ride, and probably if he did, wouldn't be able to get in one of the top three organizations right now. Like, that's a problem.
That's
where's the wealth going to, for all the cars being built the same? Go ahead, Devin. Sorry.
Well, do you think it could be there's a lack of success from a lower level team standpoint that we didn't really see 20, 30, 40 years ago, where you had more people entering these races and the barrier of entry, it feels like back then was a little bit less in terms of being in a competitive landscape. It wasn't just these top three teams. You had your good drivers back in the day, like Darrell Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt, and all them, right? But you were able to, I feel like there might have been a little bit more parity in terms of the overall competitiveness of the field, which nowadays, not
parity?
as many. Well, I'm saying it from the standpoint as like you'd be able to. There's less. I guess you could say, fluctuation in the Cup Series, I feel like, nowadays, in terms of people getting rides, right? Because a lot of
Oh
the big
yeah,
rides are locked up. Let's think about it this way. Hendrick
yeah.
Motorsports hasn't changed their lineup since 2021. And that's going to probably remain unchanged next year and maybe even in 2027. Joe Gibbs Racing has changed a little bit. SHR for a while, back when they existed, their lineup was mostly unchanged except for when Briscoe came in for Boyer, and then Custer came in after the 41 rotated after a few years. I just feel like a lot of those rides, Penske for instance, that hasn't changed since 2022 after Kozlowski left. I think
Yeah.
like movement like that we just don't see very much anymore.
Well, sure, and you've talked about the charter agreement might be a reason for that, but also you've got highly optimized drivers joining highly optimized teams at young ages. It, if there's a problem, it's like
And that's
oftentimes
the
not the
difference.
driver. The drivers are all really pretty darn good. And back in the day, I think it just used to be a lot more fluke. Not fluky's not the word, but it just a team and a driver could get over themselves and they just go find another one of what they needed. And there were a lot more of them because they're so independent. And now, when you have the main block of teams, to Dan's point, but look, back in the old days too. I say the old days, whenever that was, there were only several cars that could win on Sunday, but there were a lot of people
But do
in
you
the
also
middle
think
that
that
had a chance to maybe pop up and win.
also a chance of a driver being less manufactured? And what I mean by that, like rigid in a type of way, like they're produced in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Doesn't
yeah.
feel
Jimmy
like that
Spencer
used to
probably
exist.
doesn't get a cup ride in the 2020s. So yeah. That all brings up a good point, and it's referenced by the reason we're here. Respond right here. The reason we're here is because of who are the main players late in this season. All right, and even the Penske cars that make the championship four this time, but they're part of the big guys. But there were Trackhouse, Roush, Spire, Childress. None of them were really even all that close. I mean, maybe you could say Trackhouse. Their last little hint of a breath was Ross Chastain at the Roval. And even he outscienced himself, so to speak. Looking in retrospect on the Cup season, Devin, you really thought that Sunday's race was one of the best there. What was another highlight for you for this season? There's been so much negative kicked around, but was there just something else? You went to a lot of races, but also there are a lot of people that felt pretty upset about things too. And you, before the show, had a comment to that.
Yeah, I think the positives about that, we look at Echo Park Speedway this year, Chase Elliott winning that race. That was definitely probably the best race I attended this season. The new broadcast partners coming in, Turner and the Prime coming in was another
Max,
highlight.
yeah.
I think there were a lot of good
Prime,
things.
yeah.
Best championship battle we've had in forever, it feels like. So those were the really big positives. I think the lowlights, well, I know you didn't ask me about the lowlights, but short track I think was a big miss this year. But overall, I thought this year wasn't too bad. I think there was definitely more negativity. I feel like the biggest, most impactful negativity isn't the people complaining about the playoff format, but it's the fact that we saw the negatives from this current generation of car really come out this season. And that might have been a little bit of because of this where races fell on the schedule, getting so many short track races back in the spring, all right next to each other. So there's a lot of factors that play into it, but there were definitely some highlights in this season, and it's not a bad season by any means.
Well, yeah, it's tough to quantify. I think that's the thing, but it's also for me tough to look at an entire season and say, God, a whole season was bad. Like, man, because maybe I'm too much of an optimist. Maybe I just love racing too much. I don't know. I don't know. I got 36 races of some of the best drivers in the world. It couldn't have been that bad, could it? Just maybe not as memorable as some others there. Dan, you talked about the OEM thing. Was there anything else that was a highlight for you that you saw on the good, or something else that stuck into you that needs rectifying this offseason?
I was listening to Devin talk about the TV broadcast and stuff, and we've we've touched on some things that definitely in the off season we need to expound upon
Oh, we
and talk
will.
about it a little bit more in depth. But the fact that for me, the broadcast side of it, look how that's changed for me in the course of 30, 40 years when not a race was on TV. It was on radio, not a race was on TV. Do you really think that I look at that and say that was one of the worst broadcast races I've ever seen? No, because we all have our good days and our bad days. There's all things that we can go back and play armchair quarterback and change. It's just like in this we got to talk about as well as the 2-tire, 4-tire deal that Hamlin did. We got to talk about that. But it goes back to there's no way on God's green earth that you can cover everything perfectly. They're doing the best they can, and I know that there are things just like in me and what I do here with y'all. There's ways that I can improve. I could wear a necktie. I need to wear a necktie and look better and so forth. There's a lot of things that I could do to improve, and I'm not trying to throw off on nothing. I'm just trying to point out that there are things I can change, there are things that they can change. But at the end of the day, is the product, is what you hear, what we're trying to project out there is and you'll be able to tell that by how many people tune in and don't. But it comes down to how's the product. And I thought that these races during the course of the year, regardless of whether people complained about whether the coverage was good or bad, I thought the product was, as I'd said before, I thought the product is where we were hurting, and that is the fact of how the races are conducted and the consistency. And at the end of the day, does something need to be changed? Because it's like Hamlin pointed out and several other drivers for a long time, those cars were, the impacts were dangerous, and they need to do something about the car. And I don't know if much has been changed about that, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like they're talking about now on what we're looking at in society, and it is hard to not think about the cost of living and what we're doing in the society. So it's hard not to think about that this is going to factor into the racing. And it's just hard to do anything about. And the product is what we need to think about. And that is not within our realm to change. We can only report on it or talk about it or complain about it. But at the end of the day, it's what NASCAR presents. And at the end of the day, I want to see a race, and that's what we're doing. We're seeing races.
Yeah. Some are better than others. Some seasons better than others too. All right. Yeah. So this all came down to, look, the Truck Series race that you mentioned, the pit call. Let's get on that real quick, and then we'll hit on other things before we pack up the toolbox here. All right. Truck Series race, for as much as Corey Heim wailed on the field, it came down to a pit call from Scott Zipadelli, the number 11 Tricon Garage crew chief there. This team just incredibly successful this year, 11 wins and before the race. And then, of course, spoiler alert, 12th win in the desert. But when that caution comes out with a few laps to go, and then he comes out of the pits 10th, it's Halloween night, and I'm at a restaurant with my wife, and I'm watching this on my phone, all right? Because I'm a great husband. And And I didn't realize he'd taken 4 and other cars had taken 2. And I said, oh, no. Oh, I was like, he's coming out 10th. There is no way. It's over. It's going to be overtime. There is no way that this is going to work out right. And then, and then, what is it? Ty Majeski looks like he's going to win the championship. A caution comes out. Corey Heim passes 7 trucks or whatever to get up on the front row, but Majeski looks like he's still going to win. Caution comes out. Heim dusts him off on the restart. Game over. I mean, it's one of those. Majeski was literally feet away from sneaking that championship out, but it looked like the 4-tire call is the way to go because Heim went 7 wide and made up all those spots. So I think Chris Gale, the bet was, and with the AI and whatever else they're using back there, hey, you've been on offense all day. Go back there, get your tires, get comfortable. You're going to pass all these guys. But the problem was it was overtime, and it's the Cup Series. And in retrospect, it wasn't the right call. But Denny Hamlin said he agreed with his crew chief's call to take those 4 tires. and they did not anticipate so many cars taking two. Maybe they should have, with Larson and Briscoe taking two earlier and holding suit. So, with that said, Dan, what did you think about the call and what went into it? What would you have done in that situation, since you have the wisdom of being able to do hindsight?
I think that I would have had to have seen, and you can pretty much tell a pit crew what they bring to the wall before the pit stop. You pretty well know by the posture of the other teams what's getting ready to happen. All right, and another thing that I saw was the fact of the difference is how long pit road is, and this is one thing I noticed was how long pit road was, and how much time you had to look at the other teams that were already beginning their pit stop. You were coming down pit road. So at that particular point in time, I would have not made that call until, and like I say, I can play armchair.
Oh, Dan's, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead. You said you're going to play, you could play armchair quarterback.
you can play armchair quarterback, but it comes down to the fact that I would have judged by the other teams what they were doing, and I would have responded accordingly because I knew that my
Yeah.
car was good enough on whatever tires they take. I'm just as good as they are, or better on those. But regardless, they made a call and they felt like they made the right call and they felt like they could make that difference up. But the problem is for the Friday, for the truck, for the Xfinity, compared to those cup cars, the truck, you're absolutely racing a brick. You have got a big brick going through the air. You're not as aero, and you can do things with the truck. And I feel like with the differences in Xfinity, you can't judge those two to make a call for the cup cars on Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's one of those. I don't know that the truck thing played into it. You just got to think, man, well, four tires ended up being the right call, but they had a second overtime to restack. Ty Majeski, if I'm remembering correctly, Ty Majeski would have won that championship if they didn't have another caution right before the white flag, basically, there for Connor Mozak's truck getting wounded there. Devin, you're about to say something during that because you wanted to weigh in on the call.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, right, Denny Hamlin's pit stall is the last pit stall on pit road, right? So by
Bingo.
the time he gets down there, those two tire stops way in the back would be done. Wouldn't you be able to
Including
adjust
Larson's.
to see that too? Now,
Yeah.
wait a minute, all these people behind us are taking two tires. Shouldn't we take two tires only as well? So also another thing too, there's only 2 laps left in this race, right? In overtime, there's only 2 laps you're racing. This isn't like 40 laps to go or even 20 laps to go. So I found it real puzzling that the 2-tire call, or the 4-tire call was made at the end of that race.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is having the number one pit stall, that by winning the pole, looking back on pit road, seeing what others were doing, and you got to remember you're only racing Larson really at this point, and Briscoe. I mean, yeah, Briscoe, but he had fallen back. But you're only racing 2 guys to win the championship, and I think if you look at what Larson's doing, see he takes 2, you're like, hey, let me just do the same thing as him. I'm going to get out before him. We race for the win in overtime, not in a 40-lap run to the finish, in overtime. Go ahead, Devin. Sorry.
But even in that circumstance, right, mentioned Larson, because it felt like he was the driver that got the least amount of attention on Sunday and had some low moments, lower than some of the other championship drivers.
He had to take a wave around to get back on the lead lap, and
Yep.
would have been trapped a lap down if not for the Carson Hocevar caution.
Yeah, and none of us picked Larson to win the championship. Nobody on TV picked Larson to win the championship, so it just felt like more of an upset, even though in a technical sense, if you just look at the traditional point standings that NASCAR uses nowadays, he would have still have won the championship. But,
Well, the traditional points that are on racingreference.com, the racing-reference.info, excuse me, but the points that don't have the playoff and all the playoff resets and additions added in. It's with stage points, that kind of thing, through the season, but not with the playoff layer. Larson would have won. He was the most consistent car in a way overall over 36 races. just quietly, and hadn't won since May 1st and did not lead a lap on Sunday. It seems like a lot of people are upset at the wrong car not winning that race, and then it coming down to that affected the championship because of all the things wrapped in with Hamlin, and he had done it. But we need to remember William Byron lost 2 races this year where he flat dominated, almost had a perfect race at Darlington in the spring and lost that one. Okay? To Denny Hamlin. No, wait. I'll think of that in a second. Sorry. I know. Who did he lose Darlington to? But it just left me. Yeah, but Byron lost. So
No,
Byron,
Hamlin.
it was Hamlin. Okay, Chase Elliott dominated where Dover, and he lost that to Hamlin. William Byron dominated the Coke 600, had it won, and got past under green, not on a fluke, by Ross Chastain. That's 3 races right there. All right, and 2 of them were won by Hamlin. Hamlin was not the dominating type this year. His wins were a lot of little squeakers and this and that and the other. You know, there was a lot of late restarts, and this is one that bit him. And it's hard not to feel for him, right? That's not what the argument here is. It's just if you're upset about the whole playoff format, it really the wrong person didn't win the race. Okay, like that's really what it was. And Larson didn't win the race either. He didn't steal the win either.
No.
They had 2 different pit calls. And if they had the same tire from before, people just wouldn't have pitted, and it would have been Hamlin winning. So you have the tire variable, the late caution, all yada, yada, yada. It's just, and then everybody takes their anger about the format and puts it all on the format. It's not only the format.
This stuff could happen in any race of the season.
Yes. But not in any championship format, and that's why people are upset, as far as the champions decided. So,
and one thing, too, with Kyle Larson, here's the stat of the week. UNG baseball and UNG softball have won a game more recently than Kyle Larson has won a race, actually. So softball last won a game a few days after Larson won his last race, and then baseball the same way.
Well, no, I'm not going to say that. Never mind. There's a lot of things that have happened since Kyle Larson won. Dick Cheney's heart had stopped beating it. Oh, never mind. Okay, so the point is, Devin's like, Dick Cheney, who's that? Okay, no. Anyway, hey, one thing that's given us something to talk about, and if enough wrong has been done, NASCAR is way more responsive than it used to be. One thing we're not going to get into in this show, there's so much that's come out since our last show, I think it was, that was revealed in the lawsuits. Yeah, our last show, my point was, hey, there's so much we don't know, and it looks like it's about to settle anyway. Or no, we didn't know it was about to settle, and then it didn't settle. But, okay, the report on The Athletic about them getting close to settling hadn't come out yet when we recorded last show, and I'm like, hey, boy, when this stuff finally drops, it's going to be huge. We just don't know enough to know about the numbers. And then literally, we hang up with the show. The report on The Athletic from Jordan Bianchi comes. They were actually very close to settling. And then they got into a spat about who's going to pay the $100 million legal cost. And then because it's going forward toward trial, a bunch of stuff became public about NASCAR's financials and about what's in the charter agreements. Because there's so much of championship weekend, we're not doing that today. All right? And I have a feeling by the time we decide to do it, it will have settled. But we do need to, there will be fun to discuss NASCAR's income in 2024 versus 2023. And while even the 2024 number is ridiculous, the 2023 one was 5 times more. Things like that, or what's in the charter agreement, the percentage of private equity allowed to own teams. I think that's fascinating. We'll get into that later. But we were spared the moment, unfortunately, guys, of NASCAR having to hand Denny Hamlin the trophy while he's suing the pants off the sport. And that, if anything, that's kind of just as a lover of irony, that's kind of a shame. But nonetheless, hey, congratulations to Jesse Love. And as much as it's stunk for Connor Zillage, crying there, the end of the Xfinity race and all of that, Junior Motorsports had 3 of the 4, and they didn't win the championship 4. It was Richard Childress Racing, scrappy RCR. Jesse Love's bookends his season with wins, his only 2 wins of the year. He wins Daytona. He does win Rockingham, and it gets disqualified, and then goes and beats the pants off of him in Phoenix. But congrats to him, drive of his career. He'll be back in that number 2 machine for next season. we did learn a couple of other things there just on the silly season front. He'll be back in the number 2. Colleague Racing. Colleague Racing has announced that Daniel Dye, so no more Xfinity Series program. Daniel Dye will run one of their trucks full-time, joining Brendan Queen. And also Justin Haley is going to return to Colleague there. He ran for them a few years in Cup, a few years in Xfinity. He'll be with them full-time in trucks next season, and I'm sure of hopes of trying to climb back into a Cup car again after falling out of grace there with Spire Motorsports. We did learn about that. Parker Retzlaff not returning to Alpha Prime Racing next season. And I think we mentioned last week Ryan Ellis not returning to DGM. I think there's still a lot of fluctuation to go on there. And I bring up Alpha Prime. Did you guys see this video? So something incredible happened. We don't realize at the back of the pack the things that go on and what's on the line. And it was a huge deal for Alpha Prime Racing, co-owned by Tommy Joe Martins, to have one of his cars finish in the top 20. And they entered the race very close in the points with both the 11 machine that was the all-star car, as it turned out, with Josh Williams getting fired, and the Daniel Dye machine very close to him in points. And Brennan Poole in the 44 managed to beat both the 11 and the 10 car in the Xfinity Series in the points, and it took a last lap pass coming to the checkered flag at Phoenix. That's a big bonus, a big difference in payout, 20 to 21st. So Tommy Joe Martin celebrating on pit road. And then the crew chief for Parker Retzlaff, the number 4 machine, teammate of theirs, right? They start jawing each other. I think maybe Joe Williams, that crew chief's name. It had to do with a misunderstanding about tires that they had bought from the truck race and that were supposed to be used on the 4 car and didn't get used for whatever reason. And they started and almost having a physical altercation, certainly a very loud vocal altercation on pit road. And of course, I'm thinking, don't y'all know there's cameras everywhere? What? I mean, I know this is heat of the moment, but I'm like, you were just celebrating, and then now you're fighting with your crew chief. That's tough stuff. I think I need to get Tommy. I had a great conversation with him back in Texas. I think I need to get Tommy Joe Martin to the podcast. I just think that would be a very informative time, and we can ask him about that. And he also had a lot to say about the NASCAR lawsuit too. So, but. I don't know. Did y'all see this video or have any comment on that? Because, man, that was wild to me. It got completely overshadowed by the championship, but no. I just don't understand in public when it's a team situation. Like, can we wait till the meeting? Like, just wait. But I guess it's the end of the season and maybe changing jobs. I don't know. But that puts the wraps on the whole season there. I'm really interested to see where the rules deals end up, where the format ends up. We also saw that Cup drivers are going to be allowed to run 10 Xfinity. I think it's 10 Xfinity races, up from 7, right? And up to 7 or 8 truck races. They've also lowered the minimum age for the Xfinity Series down to 17 for tracks. I think it's 1.3 miles or less. I don't have it in front of me, but they've expanded those things out a little bit. The Cup drivers still can't run the playoffs, but they're able to run a few more races there. Devin, you're nodding your head. Now, you started liking the sport in the era where that was starting to come to an end. Dan and I lived through Kyle Busch winning every Xfinity race, all right, and having Cup drivers win Xfinity championships. Also, it was the end of the Xfinity Series, by the way. It'll be the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series next year. But, Dev, any thoughts on Cup drivers being able to run just a few more races in each series?
I like it. I think there are certain points in certain races throughout the year in the Xfinity Series or O'Reilly Series that the Cup drivers shouldn't be able to run. Cup Series, last race of the season, maybe some of the smaller events like Rockingham Speedway, or if they ever go to North Wilkesboro, don't have them race there. I just think there's certain events where they definitely need to be at, especially at some of these higher capacity venues, Daytona, Echo Park Speedway, Charlotte. I think some of those venues, they need to have Cup drivers, because if you look at it, Xfinity Series attendance hasn't been great at the track, but now you can have more star drivers be in the field. And yes, they do tend to sometimes dominate races. I watched a race that Martin Truex Jr. at Echo Park Speedway back in 2021 dominated in the Xfinity Series, but he didn't win the race at the end of the day.
I remember that.
But I kind of made my point earlier about the lack of movement that we see in the Cup Series nowadays, and the Cup grid being elite with this charter grid, and just not a whole lot of movement coming up from the Xfinity Series to the Cup Series, especially with team rosters keeping them the same. Trackhouse Racing, the top 2 rides there, here's another team that hasn't changed since 2022. So there's just a lot of more longevity in the Cup Series that we see nowadays.
Well, they added a third car this season with Shane Van Gisbergen.
Yes. But their initial 2 rides didn't change. essentially. So
Well, I mean, but they initially were a one car team that bought Chip Ganassi, expanded to two. Yeah, they had continuity with solid drivers right there, and they finally like made a move to poach or to replace one with the other. Yeah, it's a little bit different. You could also argue last year when Zane Smith was with Spire, it was really a Trackhouse thing, sorta, because it was like a shared whatever. But yeah, I do see what you're saying. Hey, Dan. Devin said that, and I'm not completely arguing because I do agree, star power in those series matter, especially for sponsorship. But if they're not practicing and qualifying very much, and Saturday is mainly just a race day for the Xfinity Series, are more people buying tickets to see Ross Chastain run a junior motorsports car on Saturday? I don't know. I don't think they are. I think it helps sell sponsorship, Dan, but I don't know that more people are buying tickets to see Cup drivers run in a AAA series.
No, but it brings throughout the media, whether it be streaming or otherwise, you have more star power, obviously. But excuse me, I think that the key to this is what people aren't. It's more what you're missing in this is the fact that you've got so much bleed over from the cup teams down through the ranks because this was one of the things we touched on earlier about the process of bringing these drivers up through the ranks. There's a lot of this that we don't understand because we don't know the involvement in the truck and in the Xfinity and what that means with a driver development program coming up through Cup. And they've used this extensively in the last couple of years. And this is the thing that the public really don't think about. I don't think as much. Some people probably do, but not as much in the fact of this is the breeding ground for the drivers that are coming up to Cup at a very early age, a very young age. So they're developing the talent and then moving it on up. And whether the Cup drivers get to run in that arena or not, I don't think is very relevant. I think the fact that so much Cup involvement with the better Cup, the better truck and Xfinity teams is where this is at. And we don't think about that very much, but that seems to lend itself more so. And I don't find any problem at all with bringing the Cup drivers back down because your driver development programs that's coming up through truck and Xfinity. That's what it's all about for these two series anyway. To me.
Yeah, driver development. Hopefully that helps spur it and not stifle it just with the different, better seats getting taken up by people who already have seats. It also gives more of an opportunity for, say, a John Hunter Nemechek or someone like that who didn't really run in the Xfinity hardly this year, maybe a couple races, but it gives them more opportunities that if they're in a mid-level Cup ride to go to a top-level ride down low without totally leaving the Cup series. I don't know. That's something.
Well, the whole argument, I think, against that would be the fact that if these Cup drivers, as you said, there's so little practice time, and any seat time, though, is important time. And what you learn, whether it be Friday, Saturday, in the race for Sunday or whatever days you back up to, whatever you learn is very, very important. So, but there is so little time to do that anymore. You just don't get a lot of seat time. I think this is where the young drivers have come from because they get more seat time in the simulators than they do in anything.
Yeah, for sure. And look, they're going to be. It's interesting. I was trying to think of where I was going here. It's interesting how there's a movement to go to by a lot of people, maybe not a majority at all, but a lot of people to go to a 36 race season. They like mile and a halves, and they want more Cup drivers in Xfinity. This is like the bizarro world of the NASCAR rhetoric in 2006 through 2014. It's like the world is upside down. We want more mile and a halves, more Cup drivers in Xfinity, and a full season format. It's everything is cycling around, just like how Jinkos are back in style. Anyway, a last thing I want to cover here. It was tough for the Cup Series to feel special this year, or for NASCAR on the bigger networks to feel special this year. First off, it was subdivided amongst more networks. You had the CW, though, all in because they did all 33, I think it is, Xfinity races. FS1 jostled around with the times, the talent, the booth. Well, CW didn't have the booth at the track a lot, but the FS1 coverage of trucks seemed very disjointed. The Fox coverage of Cup races just seemed off. It seemed like there were sour grapes about how the TV deal had come out. It just they had a short part of the season, and it just didn't feel fully engaged. And then you're changing TV networks every several races. And then most of the, quote, NBC races were on USA. And then you finally get the NBC races at the end of the year on. And while they get a bump at viewership, the post-race show doesn't even really show on NBC. You don't even hear from the race winner, Ryan Blaney. You don't hear from two of the championship four. You hear from Larson and Hamlin, which are the two most important. And it just felt so much less special in a way. I mean, the pre-race show was the part I saw. A little bit of it was good. But the post-race, it just dropped off because they had to get to Sunday Night Football. And it did upset me. And I'm not going to get so much into it. Full disclosure, I work for 11 Alive. It's an NBC station. I'm not going to take crap all over NBC. I was upset about that. But I want to make sure people realize, here's where NASCAR is in the American zeitgeist. Here's where we are in the sports pecking order. I think there was 2.7 million people watched the Cup race on Sunday, the championship race. NBC's Sunday Night Football, and I know it's not the pregame show, but the game, they average about 25 million for a regular season game that you would think, oh, well, that's regional. It's just those two teams' fan bases. No, America's crazy about football. And even though the entire sport of NASCAR races in the same postcard every single week, it gets about 1/10 of the viewers than a national game that's the only NFL game going on. That is why, respond right here, that is why it's more reliable to watch Inside the Race and the Teardown on YouTube after the race than it is to rely on the network for it. So, that being said, we need to have a more sturdy streaming, and I mean streaming like YouTube version and NASCAR, whatever, where you're interviewing every single driver deal that's on YouTube than waiting for the network, because the network is not going to do it anymore unless it's on the streamer like Prime. That's what you're about ready to say, Dev, right? Unless you're a place that has no network window and no programming afterwards, right?
Well, I would say that's one of the reasons why they built that media facility.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the NASCAR Fast Channel, which streamed the awards ceremony on Tuesday, by the way.
Yeah. Well, so, and how was that? Did you watch it?
I was at work, so I didn't watch any of it.
Did anybody watch? Like, award ceremony was like that's where it should be streaming. You know, it's and I'm interested in some speeches. I watched Kyle Larson's speech after, but anything else? It's like, no, it's. I feel like it's for them. It's not for me. I don't know. Dan, did you find yourself chafed a little bit by how the coverage ended, or do you think that's just the times? I mean, I don't know.
No, I may have turned the TV off just as soon as Ryan Blaney got to the start-finish line.
Barely ahead. Yeah.
Barely ahead. I don't, I look at this a little bit differently, and I've said this before. I look a little bit differently at because I can almost mute the TV and watch. And, yeah, there are things you pick up when you don't, but for the most part, you can see what's going on. And, going into this race that the championship cars are the only ones probably you're going to see, unless there's a car up front that and nobody else gets talked about or heard about. It's almost as if the drivers' meeting is, okay, these four cars can do whatever they want to do. The rest of the field, y'all just better stay out of the way and sit down and be quiet and let these guys race. And
it's awkward.
It is, because it's going to come down to that anyway. It's going to come down to those four cars, and we're not going to hear much about anybody else unless it is like Ryan Blaney or a few other drivers that ran extremely well, Keselowski, because it is one of those things where you're just not going to hear about it. And I hate that part of it, but it goes with the territory, and it's sad to say, but
yeah, no, I will say in the past times though, when I've watched some championship finals of other NASCAR races, when it's like Jeff Gordon versus Terry LeBlanc or whatever, the different drivers, it really focused, even without this format with championship four and they're all even. the format generally focused on the drivers that were going for the championship. It's just that there were so many other drivers, you couldn't only focus on them because there was only two people, right? That 92 Hooters 500 was a different story in Atlanta because you had like 4 or 5 drivers that could legitimately have won, at least 4, yeah. But other ones where it came down to 2, you were forced to pay attention to the others a little bit, but it still was awkward to see 40 drivers out there, 43 on the racetrack, and they were almost just completely ignored. Again, Chase Elliott was up front and then had to pit, and it wasn't really obvious to me. I even put on X. I'm like, wait, what did I just see? Because I wasn't listening to his radio. I was listening to the 11 radio, okay? All right, well, that about covers it right here. I did want to kind of get that one off my chest because that was tough to stomach, but it's just, here's where they are in the world. It's just too... Why couldn't they put the pregame show for 10 more minutes on Peacock or just make them wait 10 more minutes? There's money to be sold. The pregame show is going to dwarf the NASCAR races numbers, and I just wish there was some way that NASCAR could seem or be bigger. I couldn't get people at my job to care about it. You know, when I brought up, hey, it's on 11 Alive, they're like, great.
I was at Taco Mac with my buddy on Sunday, and we were watching the race, and we tried getting it over the sound system because in the past I've watched NASCAR races. I was at Taco Mac and coming.
Yeah.
The NASCAR races have been, and we haven't had to request it before over the speakers.
During NFL Sunday, though?
No, they said football only.
Yep, that's it. So that's what rules the roost, and we probably need to realize the fact that that's how it's going to be. So nonetheless, you may have a bad taste in your mouth. I promise you, it's not as bad as you thought it was. And I think history is going to remember this more fondly than you think. Because, by the way, weren't you booing Denny Hamlin before this? Right, okay, thank you.
I'm going to say this. We go to 36 points next year, 36 points. 36 race, full season points. I guarantee you in 3 years we're going to see fans say, oh my gosh, that playoff format was incredible. It's just like Kentucky Speedway. It's just like Chicagoland Speedway. Seeing fans online, wanting those races back. Bam, people are going to want this playoff format back. You'll see it 2 to 3 years and be like, wow, what a great format.
Don't follow the pitchforks, y'all. Don't, because you'll be on a ride. You'll be on one heck of a ride, boy. Devin just made himself very clippable right there.
How many times have I heard that?
What's that?
How great was the championship needs to go back to Homestead. I heard that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great track, but it's you also could easily spread out 10 seconds apiece there. I do think it was time to move on from Phoenix, and I would love to see a rotation in the final races there. But yeah, nonetheless, all right. Hey, Dev just dropped a great final thought. That was mine about the TV stuff and about whatever all the stuff we've been on. Dan, you got anything else to drop in the bucket here before we put the lid back on 5 to go for another week?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the off season here because I want to elaborate more on AI and where that technology is and going future, how much more that technology is going to factor into what not only we're seeing on the track, but off the track as well, because I feel like that's what's coming more so from the production side of presenting these races to the public. I feel like that's what we're going to see more of is more AI involvement because I think AI is definitely more prevalent than we give it credit for, and it's beginning to I'm beginning to see it more and more in everything that we do, and I know that even down to I would really love to know whether AI had any involvement at all in the pit stop of Hamlin, 2 tires versus 4 tires.
Yeah. Certainly organizationally at Gibbs, the fact that Chase Briscoe also did it means there was some read somewhere. I'm just going to call it a read that said, this is the thing you're doing in overtime if you want to gain this many positions. On average, overtime, blah, blah, you'll gain 7 positions, but whatever. That they have a readout of that, whether you call it AI or engineers make it a game plan before or whatever it is, right? So I think that's a great point, and we will look into that in the offseason. We'll get more into the lawsuit stuff. December 1st trial still on track, and now these pre-trial rulings. There was a big ruling that went against NASCAR, and NASCAR – the judge, Kenneth Bell, turning its argument against itself about basically saying, no, this is a very unique marketplace, and you're the only player in it. So that seems to be a good omen for the teams after a lot of omens that have gone against the teams. We barely even know what it says, much less trying to get opinions on it right now. So we thank you all for being along for the ride, but the ride ain't over. We're going to keep this going through the offseason, get some more guests in here. As soon as I saw the Tommy Joe Martins video and just knowing what a great conversationalist he is, I'm like, that's someone we need to just have on, jump with us for 30 minutes here one afternoon and talk about it. So we'll try to do some more things like that. And of course, if there's anything you want to hear, opinions you want, hit us on social media. You can find Devin and me. Just look at us up, first name and last name. And of course, you can go to the 5 to Go podcast Facebook page, reply on YouTube, whichever. We'll try to respond, okay? For Dan and Devin, I'm Doug. God bless you all. Please share and subscribe and like and transform and baptize and all the other verbs. And we'll be back next week with another 5 to Go podcast. Take care.